Imagine for a second that you're walking into a pitch black room.
Okay.
You take a step, and suddenly your eyes catch the shape of a snake coiled on the floor.
Oh, wow. Yeah, total panic mode.
Right. Instantly, your biological alarm bells just go off. Your heart is pounding out of your chest. Your palms are sweating. Your pupils dilate, to take in more light.
Your body's basically flooding with cortisol.
Exactly. Cortisol, adrenaline, you are prepping for a fight for survival. The fear you're experiencing right in that fraction of a second is 100% real.
Yeah, completely.
But then your hand brushes against the light switch on the wall. You flick it on. The room just floods with light. You look down and you realize it's just a coiled up piece of rope.
I love this analogy.
Right. The physical threat was entirely in your mind, but the physiological toll on your body, the stress, the panic, that was absolute. In ancient Hingley philosophy, there's actually a concept for this exact phenomenon.
It's called Maya, right?
Yes, Maya. A cosmic illusion that basically makes us mistake what we see on the surface for the deeper truth. And today, we are going to ask a very, frankly, uncomfortable question. In modern healthcare, are we treating the rope or are we treating the snake?
It's just the perfect metaphor to ground what we're exploring today. Because, when we talk about medicine, we instinctively assume we are dealing with pure, objective reality.
Right, like hard science.
Exactly. We think a virus is a virus, a broken bone is a broken bone, and the system treating them is, well, purely scientific. But if you look closer, you really start to wonder if the entire architecture of how we seek and receive medical care is built on this foundation of illusion.
Yeah.
Like, what if the system itself is structurally designed to keep the lights off, so you just keep reacting to the snake?
Okay, let's unpack this. We are doing a deep dive today into the life's work of Dr. Kadyali Srivatsa.
Known to his patients simply as Dr. Shri.
Right, Dr. Shri. And we're talking about a physician with over 40 years of experience in acute and critical care.
Specifically pediatrics and intensive care, which is intense.
It is. He has been at the very sharpest edge of medicine for decades. He's been watching the difference between life and death play out in real time. And his writings, his research, and his recent technological innovations, they paint a picture of a medical system that is fundamentally broken.
Completely.
So our mission today is to synthesize his work. We're going to explore his revolutionary Dr. Maya triage system, the really fascinating integration of quantum computing and ChatGPT to decode human clinical intuition.
Which is mind-blowing, by the way.
Oh, it really is. And we'll look at the frankly terrifying dangers of algorithm-driven medicine and ultimately how to reclaim your health and your free will. We want to connect the dots and show you that the greatest threat to human health right now might not actually be a disease or an illness.
No, it's the fear of it.
Exactly. It's the fear, whether real or imagined, and the absolute medical dependency that fear creates that causes the harm.
And Srivatsa's central realization, which he drew from his 4 decades in those trenches, is exactly that. He realized that fear, whether it's an immediate, real threat or entirely imaginary, like our snake in the dark room, fear is the primary driver sending people to the doctor.
He leans heavily on a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, right?
He does. Gandhi said, "Fear of disease kills more people than disease."
Wow.
Yeah. And Srivatsa actually breaks this psychological trap down using an acronym. He calls it FEARS. He defines these as the 5 distinct forces controlling our choices and really keeping us trapped in this state of Maya, this illusion.
Okay, let's walk through what those letters stand for in his framework because honestly, it maps perfectly onto how we behave as patients.
It really does.
So F is the fear of failure. This is, being so paralyzed by the possibility of making a mistake with your own health or your child's health that you completely stop trusting your own instincts.
You just outsource your judgment entirely.
Right. And then E is the fear of economic loss. These are the survival instincts that keep you trapped in unsafe patterns because you simply can't afford to be sick.
So you look for the fastest, most aggressive chemical fix to get back to work.
Exactly. Now, A, this is a massive one.
Oh, huge. Fear of authority.
Yes. The blind obedience demanded by white coats, large institutions, and, the legal framework of medicine. It's that conditioned response that says the person with the degree is just infallible.
Right, you don't question the doctor. Then R is the fear of religion, or more broadly, rigid dogma and rules that suppress your inner knowing through guilt or societal pressure.
And finally, S is the fear of speaking the truth.
This one is so common. Being intimidated by the consequences of questioning a diagnosis or a treatment plan, so you just accept lies, or you stay silent in the face of systemic corruption.
When you are ruled by those five forces, you are just primed to fall right into what Srivatsa calls the charity trap of traditional medicine.
Right. And normally we think of charity as a positive thing.
Yeah, of course.
But in this context, it's a highly destructive dynamic. It relies on this massive power imbalance. Think about it from the patient's perspective. You're in pain, you are ignorant to the underlying medical science, and you are terrified.
You're vulnerable.
Extremely.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the desk is the doctor. They hold the specialized knowledge. They speak in Latin terms. They hold the test results. This immediately makes you completely dependent on them for your very survival.
It's essentially a hostage situation. I mean, if someone comes to you and says, I have the secret knowledge to save your life, you'll agree to anything they say.
You'll hand over your wallet, your bodily autonomy, everything.
You are so scared of the snake that you don't even question if the person selling you the antivenom is actually just pointing at a piece of rope.
That mechanism of fear literally alters your brain chemistry. It shuts down the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for logical, critical thinking, and it kicks you straight into a primal survival mode.
Fight or flight.
Exactly. And the medical system, whether intentionally through marketing or just as a byproduct of its massive bureaucratic structure, it uses the fear of death or the fear of severe complications to force compliance.
Right. The unspoken message in the exam room is always, take this pill or you'll get worse.
Don't look this up. Don't question the side effects. Trust me, I am the expert. And the grand illusion here, the real Maya, is that the drugs are actually curing you.
Which is wild because we are so conditioned to think a pill equals a cure.
We really are. But Srivatsa's work stresses this repeatedly. Medications rarely offer a true biological cure. What they primarily do is alleviate pain, mask symptoms, and postpone death.
They just alter a biomarker on a lab test.
Right, so the doctor can say the number is back in the normal range. But by handing you a pill for every single symptom you experience, the system conditions you into a lifelong dependency.
You begin to fundamentally believe that your body is inherently flawed, right? Like, it's fragile and requires constant chemical management just to survive the day.
Yes, you just suffer in silence, taking a handful of pills every morning.
Okay, but I have to introduce a little pushback here.
Sure.
Isn't a healthy dose of fear justified? I mean, look at human history, look at the recent pandemic. If we are dealing with a highly contagious, potentially deadly pathogen, shouldn't we be afraid? Shouldn't we rush to the experts who have the labs and the ventilators?
That is the exact tension Srivatsa addresses. And he makes a really vital distinction between preparedness and paralyzing panic.
Okay, what's the difference?
Preparedness is acquiring knowledge. It's understanding how a virus transmits, understanding the pathophysiology, knowing your own metabolic risk factors, and taking logical, measured precautions.
So using your prefrontal cortex.
Exactly. Paralyzing panic, on the other hand, is what happens when that fear overrides your logic. When you panic, you surrender your free will. You stop evaluating information and you just blindly demand to be saved.
You rush to the emergency room with a minor, self-limiting sniffle because you're convinced you're dying.
Yes. And that panic is what causes medical systems to collapse. It leads to the victimization of the individual who is now trapped in a cycle of anxiety. And it completely overburdens the healthcare infrastructure with people who don't actually need acute care.
Right. And if the system is flooded with fearful people, doctors just don't have time to hear their life story.
No, they don't.
Doctors are supposed to listen to patient stories and offer solutions, but they have to process them so quickly now. That forces medicine to become an assembly line, right? Which leads us directly to what the system does with this massive influx of frightened people.
They feed them into a machine built entirely out of rigid protocols.
Yes, and this brings us to the rise of what is known as evidence-based medicine, or EBM.
Now, on the surface, evidence-based sounds unimpeachable, right?
You want your medicine based on evidence,
Of
obviously.
course. But Srivatsa's analysis details how this concept has mutated over the decades into the absolute tyranny of protocols and guidelines, like the NICE guidelines in the UK.
Oh, right. Those are everywhere there.
Yeah, and they're essentially statistical algorithms that dictate care from the top down. They are rigid flowcharts based on statistical significance rather than physical examination. If the patient has symptom A, then you must order test B, and then you must prescribe drug C.
And Srivatsa saw the danger of this incredibly early. He published a letter in a medical journal way back in 1996, warning the medical community about the increasing use of pre-printed assessment sheets.
Which is wild that he saw it coming that long ago.
Yeah. These sheets force doctors to just tick boxes on a clipboard. And in doing so, they completely erase what Srivatsa calls the story of the illness.
The narrative.
Right. When a patient comes in, they're explaining their illness as they lived it, as they experienced it in their unique environment. It has deep context.
But a pre-printed sheet doesn't care about context.
Not at all. It just cares about easily digestible data points that can be fed into a hospital's coding system. As a result, people really suffer because the management focuses on these rigid, one-size-fits-all approaches rather than addressing individual patient needs.
The fatal flaw in these algorithms is that they assume all human beings fit neatly into statistical boxes.
Yeah.
But human biology is incredibly messy and highly individualized.
Yeah, we aren't machines.
Right. And Srivatsa argues that relying on these strict protocols causes diagnostic inertia and tunnel vision. Clinicians, especially newly qualified doctors or nurse prescribers who haven't yet developed decades of intuitive experience, they become terrified of deviating from the algorithm.
They're trained to look at the lab results rather than physically examining the patient.
Exactly. But relying purely on tests in isolation is mathematically and medically disastrous. Srivatsa points out a startling reality about simple diagnostics. Things like urine dipsticks have a 20 to 30% false positive or false negative rate.
Wait, let's pause and think about what that actually means in practice. A 20 to 30% error rate.
It's massive.
A false negative means you actually have a severe infection, but the algorithm looks at the test and says, you're fine.
So the doctor, following the protocol, falsely reassures you.
You go home, the infection spreads to your bloodstream, and you develop devastating, life-threatening sepsis.
And on the flip side, a false positive means you're perfectly healthy, but the test flags an anomaly.
So you're plunged into unnecessary fear, you are given a heavy course of antibiotics you don't need, your gut microbiome is wiped out, and you are sent down a rabbit hole of anxiety, further testing, and medical bills.
The texts paint this striking, almost tragic visual of the modern doctor. The stethoscope, which used to be the ultimate tool for a physician to physically connect with and listen to the internal rhythms of a patient's body.
It's become nothing more than a status symbol worn around the neck.
It's decorative, because the real diagnosis is being made by a clinician staring at a computer screen, cross-referencing a flawed lab result with a statistical guideline.
It reminds me of how we use GPS when we drive.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
The GPS is an algorithm. It uses satellite data and traffic patterns to tell you the best route. Most of the time, it's helpful. But we've all heard those insane stories of people who blindly followed their GPS and drove their car straight off a boat ramp into a lake.
Yeah, because the algorithm said there was a road.
The computer insisted it was a road, but their own eyes, their intuition, should have told them it was a body of water. When doctors are forced to blindly follow statistical protocols, they are essentially being told to turn off their brain, ignore their own eyes, and drive the patient into the lake.
Exactly. And if you black out the windshield, you have no choice but to trust the machine, even as water starts filling the car. Because what happens when a seasoned doctor, someone like Srivatsa, who has spent 40 years looking at sick children, listens to a patient's unique story and realizes the GPS is wrong?
Right.
What happens when their hard-earned clinical intuition tells them that the patient just has a self-limiting viral infection and they deliberately choose not to prescribe antibiotics or order an expensive, invasive battery of tests?
Well, Srivatsa makes a deeply controversial claim here, pointing the finger directly at the medical establishment. According to his writings, these intuitive doctors don't get a medal for saving the patient from unnecessary drugs or saving the hospital money.
No, they don't.
They get systematically victimized, and his critique of medical councils, like the General Medical Council or GMC in the UK, is scathing. He argues they have created a system that prioritizes data collection, standardization, and cost saving over individualized human care.
Now, I should just jump in here and note, for the sake of impartial reporting, we are simply outlining the arguments presented in Srivatsa's work.
Right, absolutely. We aren't endorsing a specific political stance against healthcare institutions or taking sides. We are just exploring how his texts describe these systemic issues.
Exactly. And the texts describe a situation where honest doctors who reassured patients were systematically victimized, blamed for their behavior, or criticized for deviating from guidelines.
And we see why hospitals and healthcare providers enforce these protocols so strictly. It's multi-layered.
Yes, it's to standardize care into predictable metrics. And yes, it increases cash flow through mandated testing. But primarily, it is about avoiding litigation.
It's the era of defensive medicine.
Exactly. If a doctor blindly follows the protocol, prescribes the antibiotics, orders the CT scan, and the patient still dies, the doctor is legally protected. They tick the right boxes. The algorithm is to blame, not the human.
But if a doctor uses their brilliant clinical intuition, deviates from the protocol to provide better personalized care, then something goes wrong.
They are professionally destroyed. Travaza details how doctors who reassure patients without ordering the mandated tests are harassed, blamed by administration, and often have their contracts terminated for being non-compliant.
The psychological toll of this on honest, deeply caring doctors is catastrophic. They're forced to practice in a way they know in their bones is ethically and medically wrong.
They're forced to treat the algorithm instead of the human being sitting in front of them.
Srivatsa cites a horrifying statistic in his work. He points to 30 doctors who are being investigated by the GMC who committed suicide due to the overwhelming stress, isolation, and humiliation of the process.
30. That is a staggering systemic failure.
It actively silences the true healers who try to speak the truth, and it aggressively weeds out intuition while rewarding blind algorithmic compliance.
And the tragic irony of this entire situation, this protocol-driven, defensive, fear-based medicine, is that it hasn't just harmed doctors and erased the patient narrative.
No.
By trying to eliminate all legal risk and ticking every box to appease the frightened patient, the system has inadvertently created a biological ticking time bomb that threatens the entire human race.
You're talking about the superbugs, antimicrobial resistance.
Precisely. And Srivatsa's foresight on this issue is genuinely staggering. The texts show he has been sounding the alarm about antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, since 1989.
1989.
Yes. This is decades before it became a mainstream talking point at the World Health Organization. In the early 1990s, he published findings linking the spread of MRSA, a deadly, highly drug-resistant staph bacteria, directly to routine medical procedures.
Wow.
He linked it to endotracheal intubation, which is literally shoving a plastic breathing tube down a patient's airway, in 1990. And he linked it to intravenous cannulation, which is just inserting a standard IV line into a vein, in 1992.
So he recognized incredibly early that hospitals, by their very nature of concentrating sick people and constantly performing invasive procedures that break the body's natural barriers, were becoming the primary breeding grounds for these microscopic killers.
Exactly. But the superbug crisis isn't just about hospital procedures. It's directly tied to everything we've talked about so far. Fear, the charity trap, and rigid protocols.
Right, because doctors are terrified of missing a diagnosis and getting sued, and because patients are ruled by fear and demand a magical cure for every sniffle, antibiotics are vastly, recklessly overprescribed.
Srivatsa notes an interesting historical shift. After antibiotics were discovered and mass-produced in the mid-20th century, the medical profession actually exaggerated the fear of death associated with common infections.
It was a way to undermine patients' confidence in their own immune systems and drive them into clinics to consume these new miracle drugs.
And the result of that decades-long conditioning is a crisis of unimaginable scale. We saw the absolute peak of this panic prescribing recently. A staggering 95% of patients presenting with COVID-19 symptoms during the pandemic were prescribed antibiotics.
Wait, what? But COVID is a virus.
Exactly. Now, an informed audience knows that prescribing antibiotics for a viral pathogen like COVID is medically absurd. Antibiotics kill bacteria. They do absolutely nothing against a virus.
Yet 95% of patients receive them.
It was pure, protocol-driven panic prescribing. By flooding the human population and our water supplies with unnecessary antibiotics, we are actively training bacteria.
We're forcing them into an evolutionary arms race, causing them to mutate and become resistant to our entire pharmacological arsenal.
Srivatsa warns that we are fueling a superbug pandemic that, combined with other systemic health crises, is projected to kill 10 million people a year by 2050.
Let that number sink in. 10 million people a year. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means that your conditioned instinct to rush to the hospital or the urgent care clinic the moment you feel a minor, self-limiting ailment isn't just wasting your time and money.
It is actively endangering your life.
Hospitals are where the sickest people are, and therefore it is where the most highly evolved drug-resistant bacteria thrive. By seeking unnecessary medical intervention out of fear, chasing the snake in the darkroom, you are exposing yourself to superbugs that existing antibiotics can no longer kill.
The charity of the medical system is handing you a pill to make you feel cared for today, but that very action might eventually render all modern medicine useless tomorrow.
That is the existential threat. And Srivatsa realized that you cannot fight this threat by just building more hospitals, writing stricter protocols, or discovering new drugs.
The bacteria mutate far faster than we can invent.
The only way to stop the collapse is to change human behavior at the root. You have to reduce the unnecessary foot traffic into hospitals. You have to stop the panic.
And to do that, you have to replace fear with actionable knowledge. You have to give the patient back their free will and their ability to self-assess. And that is exactly why he created the Dr. Maya system.
Right. In 2003, long before everyone had a smartphone in their pocket, Srivatsa built the Dr. Maya system. And MEOIA, in this context, stands for Medical Advice You Assess.
It is a self-diagnosis and triage tool designed to do exactly what a seasoned, intuitive physician does. Differentiate the common, harmless illnesses from the serious, life-threatening ones.
It tackles this issue by helping people differentiate between real and imaginary fears, so they aren't brainwashed into believing doctors can cure all problems.
And the brilliance of Dr. Maya is its profound simplicity. It doesn't rely on complex medical jargon that confuses and terrifies the patient. It uses a universal, color-coded system based on a combination of 3 symptoms.
Red, yellow, green, and blue.
Yes, this mirrors exactly how a veteran doctor's mind actually works in a chaotic emergency room. When a patient walks through the doors, a doctor with 40 years of experience doesn't immediately try to pinpoint the exact, rare, multisyllabic disease.
They look for broader patterns.
They look at 3 primary symptoms or vital signs to perform an immediate cognitive triage. Is this person crashing? Do they need resuscitation right now? Or are they just experiencing the normal, uncomfortable, but safe inflammatory response of a viral infection that their immune system will clear up on its own in a few days?
The goal of Dr. Maya isn't to play doctor and definitively diagnose a specific obscure disease. The goal is triage. It filters the noise. It advises you when you can safely stay home, drink fluids, and let your body work.
It tells you when you should consult a pharmacist for symptom relief.
And crucially, it tells you when you actually are in danger and need to rush to the emergency room. It's the light switch in the dark room we talked about at the beginning.
It helps you look at your symptoms objectively and say, okay, this combination of 3 symptoms falls into the green category. It's a rope. I feel terrible, but I don't need to panic.
Or, this combination is red. It's a snake. I need to act right now.
And the philosophical shift here is massive. We are moving away from the concept of charity, which we defined as those institutional handouts that create reliance and lifelong dependency, and moving toward the ancient concept of dharma.
In Hindu philosophy, dharma is about duty, righteousness, and taking individual responsibility.
Dr. Maya empowers the individual with the knowledge to protect themselves. And by protecting themselves from unnecessary medical intervention, they protect their entire community from the spread of superbugs.
Srivatsa estimates that widespread use of triage tools like Dr. Maya could reduce unnecessary healthcare utilization by up to 80%.
Imagine the systemic relief. 80% fewer people sitting in waiting rooms, demanding unnecessary antibiotics, exposing themselves to MRSA.
It frees up the doctors to finally use their time, their resources, and their expertise on the actual emergencies.
It's an incredible vision, but the story doesn't stop with a color-coded chart in 2003. Srivatsa kept refining this concept, and we see a massive technological leap forward that happened in 2025.
Ah, yes, the integration of Dr. Maya with ChatGPT and quantum computing.
This is where the intersection of ancient philosophical wisdom and cutting-edge technology becomes a reality.
Now, when we hear about AI in medicine, we usually picture a robot just scraping WebMD and spitting out a terrifying list of potential cancers for a headache. But that is not what Srivatsa built here.
Not at all. Scientists have been working relentlessly to understand how our conscious mind actually functions, right?
Yeah.
How we process data, recognize patterns, and make intuitive leaps. And there are numerous articles and pieces of information on the internet explaining it in detail since the advent of ChatGPT and quantum computers.
Right, there are scientific explanations of reality now, along with videos about it.
Exactly. And since we finally have tools capable of mapping that complexity, Srivatsa didn't use the AI to just learn medicine from a static, rigid textbook or a nice guideline protocol. Instead, he used ChatGPT to encode his own lived clinical intuition.
That is so cool.
For 40 years, he stood at the sharp edge of critical care. He learned how to recognize the subtle patterns of a failing body before a disease even had a formal name.
He learned how biological systems fail silently before they fail loudly.
He learned how a mother's fear overrides logic in an exam room. He took all that deeply human, intuitive wisdom, the exact wisdom that the protocol-driven system actively tries to suppress and punish,
Mm.
and he used AI to scale it.
It's a cognitive triage system that filters out the noise of the internet. Srivatsa notes that the internet has turned a massive portion of the population into
Oh,
cyberchondriacs.
absolutely.
You Google a symptom, and the algorithm feeds you the most terrifying possibilities because fear drives clicks. Dr. Maya GPT does the opposite. It doesn't replace the clinician, it protects them, and it protects the patient.
It acts as a shield against that paralyzing fear. It grounds you in statistical and clinical reality.
And what makes this technological leap so utterly fascinating is its profound ancestral and spiritual lineage. Srivatsa isn't just a rogue medical pioneer. He is the product of a very specific, deeply rooted tradition.
He belongs to the Kadyali Upadhyaya Brahmin lineage.
His ancestors served as scholarly advisors, specifically Astama Vigwans, or Eightfold Scholars, to the Sringeri Matha. This is a tradition of knowledge preservation dating all the way back to an inscription from 1400 CE.
For over 600 years, his family has been tasked with the dharmic responsibility of protecting, synthesizing, and disseminating knowledge for the welfare of society.
The parallels between his modern medical crusade and his ancestral deities are stunning. His family's ancestral deity is Sri Kartikeya Subramanya at the Uluru Temple.
Kartikeya is the divine physician. He is the deity of war and protection, known specifically in the texts as the demon slayer.
Just as Kartikeya destroys cosmic demons to protect the universe, Srivatsa is using Dr. Maya and AI to slay the modern microscopic demons of antibiotic-resistant superbugs.
Furthermore, in the mythology, Kartikeya wields a divine weapon called the Vel, a spear that represents piercing intellect and never misses its target.
This perfectly mirrors Dr. Maya's precise, color-coded diagnostic system that cuts straight through the confusion to identify the true threat.
There is also a powerful connection to the Nagadevata, the serpent deity. In Indian tradition, serpents represent the profound, dual wisdom of both poison and its antidote. They are the keepers of deep medical secrets.
So Srivatsa, acting as the modern scholarly priest of Kadyali, is revealing the hidden truth about the poisons of our current medical system, the overprescription, the fear-mongering, the forced dependency.
And he's providing the digital antidote through Dr. Maya. He's fulfilling a 600-year-old dharmic duty to protect humanity, just using silicon and code instead of ancient scrolls.
It's such a rich, multi-layered way to view his work. Srivatsa's entire philosophy, whether you view it through the lens of cutting-edge quantum AI or ancient dharmic duty, centers on one thing: returning agency to the patient.
It's about breaking the deep psychological conditioning that makes you believe only a doctor and a pharmaceutical drug can cure you.
He wants you to understand that your body is not a fragile, helpless machine waiting to break. We've been talking about Dr. Maya as a digital triage system to filter out medical noise. But what's fascinating is that Srivatsa argues we don't just need AI to do this.
No, our own bodies have an ancient biological version of Dr. Maya built right in.
It's an internal triage system that is incredibly powerful, but it only turns on when we stop flooding the system. Which brings us to the physiology of fasting, specifically the OMAD protocol.
Yes, the 1 meal a day protocol. This isn't just a diet trend. It is the ultimate biological expression of Srivatsa's message. It is the physiological equivalent of trusting your innate evolutionary wisdom instead of constantly relying on external inputs.
Think about it. The modern diet, much like the modern medical system, is built on relentless, constant consumption. 3 large meals a day, plus snacks in between.
We are constantly feeding the metabolic machine, just as we are constantly feeding the medical system with minor, unnecessary ailments.
The texts use a fantastic analogy for this constant state of digestion. They compare your body on a standard 3-meal-a-day diet to a busy warehouse.
I love this analogy.
Right. Imagine a massive warehouse where delivery trucks just never stop arriving, 247. The warehouse manager is screaming, boxes are piling up everywhere, blocking the exits, inventories are rotting in the corners, and the roof is leaking because absolutely no one has the time or the space to stop receiving goods and actually fix the building.
That is your body when it is constantly processing food. You never give the cellular cleaning crew a chance to come out and do their jobs.
So let's walk through what happens when you finally lock the loading dock doors and stop the trucks. Let's look at the 23-hour OMAD timeline because it perfectly illustrates the body's built-in triage and repair system.
Okay, let's start with hours 0 to 4. You've just finished your one large meal for the day. Your stomach is churning, breaking down carbohydrates into glucose. This glucose floods your bloodstream. In response, your pancreas releases a massive spike of insulin.
Now, it is crucial to understand the mechanics here. Insulin acts as a one-way biological valve.
While insulin levels are high in your blood, energy can only flow into your cells. Your fat cells become locked vaults. It is biologically impossible to burn stored body fat during this phase.
Your body is running entirely on the immediate incoming glucose from your meal, and any excess that you don't burn right away is packed into your liver and muscles as glycogen.
The glycogen is your wallet. It's easy cash. It's quick, accessible energy that the body can spend without much effort. So for the first 4 hours, you feel totally fine. The warehouse is busy processing the new delivery.
But then we hit hours 4 to 12. This is the transition zone, and this is where the illusion of fear tricks us again, just like in the medical system.
Around hours 6 or 8, that massive influx of energy from the meal is gone. The insulin manager clocks out. And your brain senses this and sends a signal saying, hey, the easy cash in the wallet is running low. It releases ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone.
And this is where most people panic. They feel that rumble in their stomach, they feel a little irritable or shaky, and they mistake this normal hormonal signal for actual starvation.
They think the snake is in the room.
But they are not starving. They are just experiencing withdrawal from the easy fuel source. Their body is like a high-performance sports car that has only ever run on high-octane racing fuel, and now it's being asked to switch over to the hybrid backup battery.
The engine stutters for a second. But if you don't panic, if you don't run to the fridge out of fear, your liver simply opens the glycogen wallet and starts quietly breaking down those stored sugars to keep your blood glucose perfectly steady.
Wait, so if I eat a bagel in the morning, my body literally cannot burn fat for the next few hours? The biological door is locked?
Exactly. As long as insulin is elevated from that bagel, the fat cells are sealed. You are trapped in the glucose burning cycle, which is why you have to push through to the magic window, hours 12 to 18. The shift.
At this point, the easy cash in the glycogen wallet is critically low. Insulin has dropped to its absolute flat baseline.
And this is the exact biochemical signal your body has been waiting for. With insulin finally out of the way, an enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase activates. This enzyme is the key that finally unlocks the fat cells.
The body realizes no more food is coming, so it stops looking externally and turns inward. The liver takes those released fatty acids and converts them into ketones.
And ketones are a superfuel. Your brain cannot burn fat correctly. The molecules are too big to cross the blood-brain barrier, so it needs either glucose or ketones. And the brain absolutely loves ketones.
They burn incredibly clean, right?
Yes. Burning glucose creates a lot of metabolic smoke or oxidative stress inside the cell. Ketones produce significantly more ATP, more energy per molecule, with far less toxic waste.
This is why, around hour 16 of a fast, that familiar afternoon brain fog lifts entirely. You don't feel lethargic. You feel electric, sharp, and intensely focused.
Evolutionarily, this makes perfect sense. If a hungry caveman got sleepy and dumb when he couldn't find food, the human race would have died out. Hunger turns us into sharp, focused, hyper-aware hunters.
Which brings us to the most profound stage, hours 18 to 22. This is where the warehouse finally gets cleaned. It is a biological process called autophagy.
I want to spend some time here because this is where Srivatsa's concept of internal triage really shines. What exactly is autophagy doing?
Well, the word autophagy literally translates to self-eating. With no new deliveries arriving at the warehouse for nearly a day, the cellular manager realizes they still need raw materials to keep the metabolic machinery running. So the deep cleaning crew comes out.
They start aggressively scavenging the warehouse. They look for damaged senescent proteins. They look for misfolded cells, which are the exact precursors to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or even cancer.
They even hunt down viruses and invasive bacteria hiding inside your cells. The body creates a specialized membrane around this microscopic junk, dissolves it using enzymes, and recycles it into pristine, brand new amino acids.
It is deep internal repair. It is the body acting as its own physician, clearing out the exact pathogens that send people running to the hospital in a panic.
It's the ultimate triage. It identifies the real threats, the misfolded proteins, the viruses, and eliminates them. But naturally, when people hear self-eating, they push back. I hear this all the time. Isn't fasting just starving your muscles? If your body is eating itself for fuel, won't it just eat your bicep?
It is the most common myth surrounding fasting, and it is physiologically backwards. Right as you get deep into the fast, around hour 20, your body releases a massive surge of human growth hormone, or HGH.
Research notes that HGH can spike by up to 2,000% during a prolonged fast.
HGH acts like a protective force field around your lean muscle tissue. It chemically tells the body to aggressively burn the fat but leave the muscle completely alone.
As the literature brilliantly puts it, your body is incredibly smart. It is a highly evolved survival machine. It is not going to burn the furniture, your muscles, to heat the house when there is a shed full of firewood, your stored body fat sitting right outside the door.
It burns the firewood first.
And finally, we reach hour 23, the refeeding phase. You've cleared out the junk, you've burned the fat, your HGH is peaking. Now, your insulin sensitivity is through the roof.
Your cells are like bone-dry sponges, ready to absorb everything you give them. This is why breaking the fast correctly is so critical.
If you flood a highly sensitive, newly repaired system with a massive load of processed carbohydrates like a pizza and a soda, you will cause a massive insulin spike and crash hard.
You need high-quality protein to rebuild the cellular structures that were broken down during autophagy, healthy fats to keep the metabolic machinery running smoothly, and leafy greens to replenish the micronutrients.
The OMAD protocol proves Srivatsa's fundamental point perfectly. The human body is not a fragile, helpless entity constantly teetering on the edge of collapse, requiring external pharmaceutical interventions and pills just to survive.
It is a robust, anti-fragile survival machine with profound built-in triage and repair systems.
But those repair systems, whether it's autophagy clearing out viruses or a doctor's clinical intuition clearing out diagnostic noise, can only activate when we stop flooding the system with excess. Excess food, excess fear, excess tests, excess antibiotics.
It all comes back to turning off the noise and turning on the light.
We've gone on quite a journey today. We started in the dark room, paralyzed by the cosmic illusion of Maya, mistaking the rope for the snake. We explored how the modern medical system weaponizes that exact fear, trapping patients in a charity model of lifelong dependency.
We saw how the rise of algorithm-driven evidence-based medicine forces honest doctors to abandon the human narrative, punishing them for using their intuition.
We saw the terrifying biological consequence of that systemic panic, the rise of superbugs and antimicrobial resistance that threatened to plunge us back into the pre-penicillin dark ages, potentially killing tens of millions.
But we also found the antidote. We explored how Dr. Kadieli Srivatsa channeled a 600-year-old dharmic lineage of societal protection to create Dr. Maya.
We saw how the integration of his 40 years of lived clinical intuition into an AI like ChatGPT offers a way to democratize knowledge, filter out the noise of our imaginary fears, and empower every individual to accurately triage their own health.
And through the lens of OMAD fasting, we saw the physical, biological proof that our bodies are designed to heal themselves if we just give them the metabolic space to do so.
The ultimate takeaway here is that true health requires you to step completely out of the charity trap. You cannot passively consume healthcare the way you consume entertainment. You have to become an active, educated participant in your own survival.
You have to learn to differentiate the real threats from the imaginary ones.
Because it is not always a disease or an illness that harms us. It's the fear of it and the medical actions we take blindly out of that fear that cause the deepest, most lasting harm.
And that leaves us with one final provocative thought to mull over. We are standing at the edge of a radically new era where artificial intelligence and quantum computing, trained on the intuition of master clinicians, can finally give the power of diagnosis and triage back to the individual.
But history shows us that massive systems of power do not surrender their monopolies willingly.
If algorithms and AI like Dr. Maya GPT are currently being used to scale human intuition, break the chains of medical dependency, and reduce hospital visits by 80%, what happens when the massive medical establishment inevitably tries to regulate or restrict these self-diagnostic AI tools?
Will they claim it's for our safety while actually acting to maintain their multi-trillion-dollar financial monopoly on care? Will the next great battle for human health be fought inside the halls of a hospital? Or will it be fought over your legal right to access, understand, and act upon your own biological data? Until next time, remember the dark room. The next time panic sets in, take a breath, turn on the light of knowledge, and ask yourself, am I looking at a snake, or is it just a rope?